Welcome back, everyone. This is our fourth video in the course International Marketing Management. You'll remember from yesterday that we're using an onion model to explain the process that we're going through to develop our marketing plan about how we are going to bring our product to market. Yesterday, we talked about the market characteristics and how to size and scope the attractiveness of a market. Today, we're going to start off with elements of the organization, and specifically how core competencies can allow us to establish a strategic fit with the market. In this lecture, we're going to be talking about the concept of core competence. We will highlight the link between core competence and strategic fit, and we will identify the types of core competencies that organizations can have. So for our activities, we'll be talking about the 5 characteristics of core competencies and the meaning of strategic fit, and then we'll have a reflection. If you've already had a course in strategic management or business policy, you probably talked about core competencies in that class. That's because oftentimes core competencies are something that is considered important for the overall management of the organization. It's also especially important for operations management. So you might be wondering, why are we talking about it in a marketing management class? Well, we're talking about it here because of what it allows the company to do in terms of being the basis for a strategic fit. And when companies can leverage their core competence in that way, it really increases their chances for having a competitive advantage, being able to diversify successfully, and being able to meet the needs of the marketplace. So what is a core competence? It is the most significant skill in a company. We could think of it as a central feature of the organization. And remember that a core competence is a skill, not a thing. Sometimes this is just a matter of how we're talking about the activity for the organization. So sometimes we may need to just reword how we are talking about things. For instance, what if you were to say that an organization had a really strong brand? Okay, well, that's a thing. It's not a skill. But we could say that the organization is skilled at branding, and in that case, branding could be a core competence. So always remember that a core competence is a skill, not a thing. Now, organizations have many skills. In fact, they might have hundreds of skills in the organization. But typically, organizations will only have 1 or 2 skills that are truly core competencies. And it is the core competencies that we need to be able to identify in order to know if we will have a strategic fit with the market which we seek to serve. Once we know what the core competence is, this can be a starting point for developing our marketing strategy. Strategic fit is defined as the degree to which a company matches its resources and capabilities with the needs of the market. When our core competencies match with the needs of the market, this means that we are congruent with the needs of that market and we are able to efficiently and effectively meet their needs. This provides us with a competitive advantage, and particularly if we are diversifying, it allows us to minimize the risks that we might otherwise face. And I'll be explaining more about strategic fit as we go through the examples of the companies and their respective core competencies. Remember, I mentioned to you that core competencies are skills, not things. And how will we know what of the many skills in our organization is the core competence? If we have so many different skills, how could we identify the core competence? Well, core competencies will have 5 characteristics. And it's important to remember that for a skill to be a core competence, all 5 characteristics must be present. If there are only 4 characteristics present, then that skill is not a core competence. And in fact, if something like that happens, the organization might decide that they want that skill to be a core competence. And in that case, they would set about trying to acquire excellence in that particular area, improving that particular skill until it is a core competence. Okay, so again, skills that have all 5 characteristics are core competencies. And those 5 characteristics are distinctive, pervasive, significant investment, scalable, and competitive advantage. Let's go through those one by one. Distinctive means that the company manages that particular skill in a distinctive manner from other organizations. In other words, how they perform that particular activity is unique in some way. It stands out in some way. Perhaps they identified their own proprietary process for performing that particular activity. The second characteristic is pervasive. Pervasive means that the recognition of that skill as a critical foundation of the organization pervades the entire organization. No matter what level you work at, no matter what your job is, no matter where around the globe you might be in a global organization, the recognition of that skill as a critical function for the organization is present. The third characteristic is significant investment. This means that the organization makes a significant financial investment in maintaining and improving that skill. The fourth is scalable. This means that the skill allows economies of scale for the company. And finally, competitive advantage. This means that because that company has this skill, it has an advantage over the competition in the marketplace. And while all 5 characteristics must be present for a skill to be considered a core competence, I would say that the 5th one, competitive advantage, is the most important of these characteristics. So let's take a look at a few organizations and talk about what their core competencies are. First here, I have the retail giant Target. And I think Target had expanded at some point into Europe. I believe it's pulled out of Europe. I know it's pulled out of Canada now. But it is a very successful retail chain in the United States. And it is successful here specifically because of its core competence. Do you have any guesses about what the core competence is? The image I have on the slide is a hint for you. Target's core competence is merchandising. It is excellent at the skill of merchandising, and this includes it developing its product assortment, its product portfolio and mix, displaying the products in an exciting way, and we can even see how impactful merchandising as a skill is in terms of Target's ability to reach its target audience, because we will oftentimes refer to Target as Target. That's to emphasize our belief that while the products are primarily low priced, they also have a great deal of style and design. So if we think about merchandising as Target's core competence, if we were to do our research into Target, we would find that merchandising is distinctive, pervasive. Target makes a significant investment in maintaining and improving its skills at merchandising. It is scalable, and it does provide a competitive advantage. And this is particularly clear if you compare merchandising at Target to merchandising at Walmart, which is Target's #1 competitor. So that brings us to Walmart. And what would you say is Walmart's core competence? Well, if you guessed operations management, you would be right. And that is a pretty broad category. There are a lot of sub-skills that are a part of managing operations as a skill set, but still I think it would be correct to say operations management is the core competence of Walmart. It is distinctive, pervasive. Walmart makes a significant investment in it. It absolutely is scalable, and it does provide a competitive advantage. And we can see this in many of the decisions that are made by Walmart. Now, Walmart is also a good example of the meaning of strategic fit and how it flows out of the core competence. Sometimes when I ask this question with groups, people will say, oh, Walmart's core competence is offering the lowest price. Well, that's not actually the core competence. Instead, the core competence of operations management allows it to keep its costs very low, and because of that, it has the option of offering the lowest price. So the market wants the lowest price. That's the primary thing that it wants from Walmart. And Walmart's core competence allows it to provide that lowest price and still earn and still be profitable. And so therefore we can see the essence of strategic fit. A company could have a core competence of operations management, and this allows it to keep its costs low, and yet it may not send those low prices onto the marketplace. Perhaps it does something differently. Nike is an example of a company like this. It too is excellent at operations management. It makes a lot of decisions that allow it to keep its costs very low, and yet they charge a price premium to the target audience for its products. So just because we have high levels of efficiency in our operations doesn't necessarily mean that that's what we're going to deliver to the marketplace. It would depend on what it is that the market values and what strategic fit that core competence allows us to do. My third example of core competence is with Amazon. And this one sometimes is a little bit difficult for people to guess, and that is because Amazon is good at so many things. Can you identify what Amazon's core competence might be? Perhaps you said logistics, or perhaps you said product assortment, since even the logo means everything from A to Z. Or perhaps you said data management or shipping. All of those would be correct. And in fact, we could categorize this, much like we did with Walmart, by simply referring to it as the larger scale area of operations management. Amazon is a mastermind at all of these components, and it has led to great success for Amazon. But remember when I said that we must have a core competence that allows us to have a strategic fit with the needs of the marketplace? Well, if companies don't adhere to that basic rule, they will have a failure. And we saw this last year with Amazon. Amazon focused one of its teams on the product design for the Amazon Fire phone. This was to be an entry into the mobile phone market directly from Amazon. Now, historically, Amazon has not manufactured its own hard goods, so this was quite a switch in strategy for Amazon, and it was a miserable failure. In fact, the company took a write-down of more than $160 million in losses associated with the Fire phone. When it was brought to market, it was priced at around $200. And now, if you wanted to have an Amazon Fire phone, you could buy one for only $1. That's because they're so desperate to deplete that inventory for this major product failure. Now, if we think about what kinds of core competencies would lend themselves to being successful with the development of hardware like a cell phone, and then we thought about the core competencies that Amazon has, you can see that there is no strategic fit between Amazon's core competencies and what it would take to deliver a mobile phone to the prospect market. And so in hindsight, it's really clear why Amazon failed. And this is why we cover this here, because even though this is an organizational concept, it's something that is really critical for us in ensuring that we have the right strategic fit with the market that we seek to target. So as we move forward throughout our onion, we are next going to go into go-to-market strategies, and those strategies will in part be based on what our core competencies are. And that's why we study core competence in this International Marketing Management course. Core competencies should allow us to create an asset that fits strategically with the needs of that market. And it's especially relevant if we are considering the opportunity of diversification. And for the example that we just talked about, a Fire Phone was a form of diversification for Amazon. If you would like to do some other reading on diversification and companies that were successful and companies that failed and how it was their core competence that enabled them to be successful or prevented them from being successful, I encourage you to read this article from Harvard Business Review. I've included the link here in the PowerPoint, and I've also posted the PDF for this article on Ishik Campus and on our Facebook group. In summary, core competences are skills, not things. They are the most significant skill that an organization has, even though an organization may have hundreds of skills. And it's always a skill that has all 5 characteristics. The skills that are core competencies are distinctive, pervasive, have a significant investment made in them, enable economies of scale, and create a competitive advantage for the organization. When all 5 characteristics are present, then that skill is a core competence. And then that should allow us to develop a strategic fit that helps us to meet the needs of the target audience. In our next video, we're going to be learning about the Strategic Quadrants framework and go-to-market strategies. I'll see you then.